Welcome to the Black and White Podcast. They call me Ferdinand, the bringer of balance, leader of many disciplines, and one of your hosts of the Black and White Podcast. I'm here with my co-host, Tim Pop.
And coming from Virginia, it's got to be just lovely down there. Better weather than what we're having, I'm sure, is Ferdinand Thomas. Good to see you, brother.
It's great to see you too, man. How's it going?
Good. Yeah, it's nasty outside, though, man. We got 3 inches of snow coming tonight.
Yeah, Chicago. Yeah, it's cold up there.
Yeah, you don't like the weather? Just wait 15 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah, 15 minutes sounds good. So everybody who's with us today, thank you very much for tuning in to the Black and White Podcast. Tim and I will be talking about a very special topic. And we're in episode 7, the indigenous structures in America. There are many of them all over this country. Tim, what was your reaction when you really started diving into, looking into some of these indigenous structures?
Well, it's interesting because it's always something that I've paid attention to. We've got, along the Mississippi River here and up in through Wisconsin, and of course down south too, but places that I've noticed that, these mounds, we call them Indian mounds. And I paid attention to them to some degree, as well. What is that exactly? Is that a burial mound? Never really knew what it was, or never really heard any potential history on it. So I was really quite blown away when you started telling me some of the history around these things and what they are and what the origins are, and really how different history could be than the way we learned it.
Absolutely. I appreciate you sharing that with everyone. This book, for everyone who is tuning in, this book is Ancient Monuments of the Mississippi Valley. Its copyright is 1848. I got this book out of the Department of Defense Library, which used to be called the War Department Library. And this book details of a whole lot. Matter of fact, I'll go to the table of contents. It details a lot of indigenous structures throughout the Mississippi Valley. But they're all over the United States. Make no mistake about it. Let's see, what does this say? The Vice President of the United States, President of the United States, Smithsonian. All right, so I think we're coming up on it right now. There's a lot of pages in between the.
Yeah, they do that. This page intentionally left blank.
Yeah. So we got quite a few different types of mounds here, as y'all can see. We got they're labeled in monuments, but some of them are mounds. We got the temple mounds right here. They're all up and down the Mississippi Valley, and we're gonna take a look at a couple of different. We're gonna take a look at some pictures. We're gonna take a look at some other doctrines, some other books that have quite a few of these indigenous structures. Tim, one of the things that I really appreciate is, and I'm glad I have this page pulled up specifically. As you all can see here, there's a whole lot of them in the state of Ohio, right? Ross County, Butler County, Montgomery County, Scioto County. Like these locations in Ohio had a large amount of indigenous peoples there, and building things, obviously creating things. So in the state of Ohio, Tim, this was wild when I figured this out. In the state of Ohio, there's more mounds and indigenous structures than in most countries. And get this, in Ohio, not only is there more than most countries, there's been hundreds or thousands of them destroyed throughout the process of colonization.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I find most amazing is, as I was looking at it a little bit closer, was there's these structures that are here in the States that are 1,000 years older than the Egyptian pyramids. and the structure, the building style is very similar.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Here goes another one right here. See what we have in the mastermind library for everyone who's listening. We got a lot of different books in here, right? And we go for the books that could be considered um, ancient or could be considered early versions of their material on purpose, because there's certain certain time frames have lesser amounts of censoring, right? So this book right here is from 1893, and this is about the archaeology of Butler County, the mound builders, right? So there's a number of these books in the mastermind library, and I'm not going to go too much into each book, but I did want to make sure that I show it to each person so you can know, how to get this information, because this is not something that you necessarily got to sit down and get lip to ear type of, there's certain knowledge that it does have to come through oral tradition. But this is some knowledge that a person can get just from firsthand going out to the Mississippi Valley trying to find the mounds, and then or you can pull the books from Princeton's library, Library of Congress. You can pull the books from Oxford's library. There's quite a few libraries where you can pull the digital versions of these books, and there's websites like Scribed, PDF Drive, and a number of other websites where you can get some great reading material on ancient America and the indigenous structures. But before I pass it on to you, Tim, one of the structures that really impresses me that's still standing to this day is Cahokia Mound. And for everyone out there, Cahokia Mound is in East St. Louis. It's on the east side of the Mississippi River from the city of St. Louis. Yeah, more than likely isn't any more than 10 to 15 miles away from the city of St. Louis.
Hmm. I've been to East St. Louis. I didn't see any mountains. East St. Louis is kind of known to be a little bit dirty. But talking about history, one of the things that's interesting and that I'd like you to talk on a little bit more is our perception as Americans, as living in the USA, our perception of the indigenous people are, that there's a certain look. Oh, I guess we referred to them in old times anyway, red skin, red skin. So that it's just the tone of the melanin is a little bit different than somebody who has more of a darker, like a blacker skin, or even to the point where there's so much melanin that almost like just that deep. I saw a picture of I can't remember where Kenya or something like that, but I mean that as a photographer, and I was trained to shoot photography and videography. As a photographer, the lighting is really tricky when you're trying to shoot video or stills of somebody whose skin absorbs all the color, which means there's no reflection of anything. Here I look kind of pink or red, whatever. So it's easy to shoot somebody who's got lighter skin, but talking about the original people that were here in the States, you were telling me that they look more, that there's a lot more that looked like you than what looked like a traditional, what we consider to be Native American.
Absolutely. So when we start going back in time, we start getting blacker and blacker and blacker people, right? But through the process of colonization and also the lack of minerals in food, then we start running into issues with melanin acquisition, for lack of a better term, melanin development, and people start getting lighter skinned.
Yeah, there
So this
was
that I have on the screen for everybody, this is Cahokia. And let's get a couple other ones. Here goes a little bit of an older photo, but still a good one. So this is Cahokia. It's one of the largest mounds in the United States, and I just want everybody to understand the only place where you can find mounds is in the United States, and I believe Canada. You might find a few in Mexico, but North America is the only place where you're going to find them. You were saying something, Tim?
No, please go on.
Yeah, so it's kind of hard for a lot of people to grasp the concept that the pale skin people of the world, no disrespect to anybody, but they come on the scene just thousands of years ago. So this is there's different stories on how Caucasian people came to be. um, Obviously, we have our story in the Bible with Noah and his sons and him being drunk. But then there's also narratives of how Caucasians come to be, um, from other masters like Dr. Malachi Z. York, as well as a few other highly respected, um, highly respected scholars, some prophets. So at one point in time, everywhere on the earth, that's all there was people with swarthy skin.
Yeah, the to get this color skin, it only requires, it's like, I mean, it's the tiniest little speck of change on the DNA that makes that change happen, and it's that dramatic, where the melanin production is, it's not non-existent, which would be albino. It's very, very rare, but where this light skin comes from, this tiny, I mean, we're talking about 0.00 some percent of the DNA that we carry, and it's just this one little side. And I'd want to look at it a little bit closer, but I think it's like one allele on one gene that is the change, and that's what makes the difference between having the light skin and having these light eyes. Um, it's interesting that it's such a tiny little thing that one little change, and everything's different. So back to the mounds. One of the things I was looking at was, and this is what I find interesting. You talk about the Mississippi River Valley. If you look at the Mississippi, it actually shows that basin is enormous. I mean, it's quite large, but the path of the Mississippi, as you follow that down to the ocean, there's a lot of mounds that follow that path, and one of them, some of the oldest mounds that are around, it says Poverty Point, Louisiana.
Absolutely. So that's on the west side of the Mississippi River in northern Louisiana, and they just last year, Poverty Point just celebrated their 10-year anniversary of becoming a United Nations World Heritage Site.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Interesting that it follows that, and as it would, trade routes and so on, follow the path of the water, and we've got a lot of that in the States. So, to kind of think about what life might have been like that in that era, it's pretty fascinating stuff.
Especially when we know that, like you said, for trade routes, the transportation routes, if you wanted to move quickly, was the riverbeds, right? So when we pay attention to the riverbeds and them having that level of importance, well, the ancient peoples were the ones who had control of it. We didn't have I-95 and I-20 then. We didn't have Avenue and Drive and Road and Boulevard then. So these travel routes as well as trade routes were governed by the ancient peoples who lived a very specific way, which was why this land was and still is considered the richest land on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this image that I put on the screen right here, I put it up on the screen because prior to our conversation, you and I, we were touching on in the Bible, the book of Isaiah, chapter 11, verse 15. And it speaks about the Egyptian sea being smited, the mouth of it being smited into seven streams, right? Well, here goes the seven streams right here. That would make the Gulf of Mexico, or what is now known as the Gulf of America, the ancient Egyptian sea, based on interpretation of a biblical verse.
So that if you're all paying attention, whoever's out there, this is completely different than what we're taught in history books, where the origin of man, the original human beings that walked the earth, even to that point, all the way through to what the Egyptian land was, that was in Egypt, that actually happened later, that happened after this period of time. So a lot of those references that we think are based in the Middle East, a lot of those references, they can be based right here in the U.S.
Absolutely. And I'm going to put another map on the screen real quick, because I want people to get a chance to see what maps, what cartographers, how they used to draw maps. Like, this is very significant how they once drawed maps. I'm going to bring one, how they once drew maps. Excuse me. All right, so this map right here is a great example. This map right here clearly puts the United States of America, North America as a whole, in the east. And how we know that this map is drawn exactly how it's supposed to is because when we zoom in on Africa, it's not written upside down. It's written exactly the way it's supposed to be written. Well, things have been turned around. Things have been changed. There's been a lot of confusion put on the table. And that makes so much sense that confusion was put on the table, because after the 1500 Jubilee year, there's many changes that was happening within the papacy, many changes that was happening within the ways that the European was doing things, in addition to colonization in full swing. So yeah, you want to make sure you can control the whole world. You got to confuse them. You got to turn everything upside down. This map right here, just for everyone out there, this map is, I'm not sure the cartographer's name, but he published this map in the year 1566, according to the Library of Congress, which is where I got the map from.
So as recently as, yeah, and that where actually the map is upside down, or right. That would have been right side up at the time, but the map is upside down from the way we look at maps today.
Absolutely. But most of the maps that I'm able to find, well, I ain't gonna say most, a bunch of the maps that I'm able to find prior to the 17th century, a bunch of them are drawn just like this. Españole, Hispaniola, Haiti and Dominican Republic, Cuba. Here goes Mexico City right here.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at the old maps and seeing how things were laid out. And what's amazing is, they didn't have any aerial photography. So there was no overview. They laid this out by walking the land, by actually physically coming in contact with it and laying it out as they went. Change directions, make that change on the map. And it goes for this many paces. It's quite the task. To see what it takes to make. I mean, you learn a little bit about that when you do land navigation, like in the Army, or there's other places, of course, other people in classes and so on that teach that. But you learn a lot about how maps are put together and the importance of them, and how detailed they can be, and how close you can get to landing at an exact spot.
Absolutely.
You see some of this ancient stuff, even back then. You know, it was once they understood. Well, there's an interesting image.
This image right here, I brought it up because you were saying we didn't have an aerial perspective of the Earth.
Yeah. Okay.
And when this is King Pakal.
Thinking traditionally.
This is King Pakal of Palenque in the Yucatan Peninsula. And so this is down in Mexico, right? Not too far from the Gulf of America. And this is his sarcophagus lid. Now, when people look at this sarcophagus lid, they normally say, "Oh, wow, that's a really nice drawing. That's a really nice carving," and they don't really looking at what this is. So when we say, obviously I get what you mean. You're talking about the Western world not
Yeah.
having the aerial perspective. Completely understand. But based on this carving alone, the aerial perspective was achieved minimum thousands of years ago, because this right here is not a motorcycle. This right here is clearly a flying device. And this is
Yeah,
not
if anybody who's watched Ancient Aliens has seen this.
Yes.
This image. George, the funny hair guy. He's got the big hair, but he's anyway. It goes into the details on this, what these things are in these drawings, talking about it. The seat, that's actually the seat of a craft, of an aircraft. And then he's got the navigation controls in front of him, and the illustrations, the carvings are done because, humans didn't have references to that, of any of that. So they're looking at this for the first time and they're carving it the best they can, with probably some great accuracy, but also a little bit of artistic license, so to speak. But very, very clear that it's nothing except mechanical devices, and certainly looks like would be for what would be aircraft. It's interesting stuff.
Absolutely interesting. I got something else that I want to show, and I think this one right here is a super important piece. So this right here is Wakanda Springs. Okay. Now, please understand that many people out there has seen a movie called Black Panther and may not have known that the backstory, a portion of it, or really all of it, is from Kansas, not from Africa. Okay. Wakanda Springs is in Kansas. Now, this aquifer water volcano, this is very similar to what we see in Yellowstone Park, right? But it's not there anymore. Well, if you go there and try to set up a spa, then it's not going to work the way it's supposed to. It's going to go away. So now, where Wakanda Springs once had had this volcano of healing spring, there's just a marker, like what we would see if a church lasted for 100 years, and now there's a marker there and you can read about it. Same thing with Wakanda Springs. Now there's also Wakanda Lake. Okay. I think these are super significant things to really understand, that many of our movies, we might not know that a bunch of these movies are based on things that have taken place right here in the United States of America. I'd like to very much so point out that Moab is in Utah. Goshen is in Utah. If we want to go to Mount Nebo, we go to the state of Utah, right? And when we look at those Great Salt Plains, or the Great Salt Lake Desert, where they're doing all that racing, that Tim and I, we've talked about this quite a few times, about all that salt that's out there, and it's flat. Well, the only way that you could get that done is because it's too much. You're not going to get enough construction crews to get this done. This is going to take a whole lot of water, right? So that brings us back to the possibility of a conversation about a great flood.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, what do you expect to see if there's a great flood? You'd expect to see dead things buried all the way around the world. Well, that's what do you see when you go out and you start digging around in the in the canyons and salt flats, like what we're talking about. You see all kinds of dead things buried throughout the world. Well, it all represents, and the primary thing, and if you look at the image of the United States and you just Google Maps, you can see the water flow from those flats down into the Pacific Ocean. And it's to see that where that water flow was, you can see kind of get an idea where it came in, but certainly where when it drained, where it went out. And those what was left behind is it's all those huge salt deposits, and they were smoothed out to the point where they were absolutely flat. And salt being crystalline, it packs in tight and makes a really excellent surface, as good as pavement would be, which is why you hear about those the races out there. That's what those salt flats are all about as far as modern man is concerned. But to think that the water was there once before, well, the water could come back and be in that exact same spot again, just based on we talked about pole shifts in an earlier episode, and some of the different things that are going on far beyond any kind of now we're talking we're hearing the right kind of words, climate change instead of global warming. It's climate change, and those changes, they happen. It's a cyclical thing that happens throughout history and will continue and will happen again here, potentially even fairly soon. So what's going to be underwater first? Well, you tell me. Take a look at the maps and you can see places like that, places like the salt flats, and where the water has flowed in enormous quantities, and where it'll probably flow again sometime in the future.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. But I'm all when it comes down to this climate change pole shift, what I'm also seeing is the weather shifting, right? So you got weird storms happening in February and January, March, right? But you also got snow in places where you don't normally have snow, like Iran, like New Orleans. Not saying that it doesn't snow there at all, but it doesn't snow often in these places,
Yeah.
at certain times of the year. So this to me looks like pole shift, but just kind of go.
If you have that pole shift, you've got the Earth, the globe, and you've got North and South Pole. It spins on its axis, and the axis is that magnetic pulse. So you have this spin that's happening like this. Well, as the poles shift, the Earth it straightens back out, and then it keeps the same spin in relation to the sun and the rest of the solar system. So that's where you have that change, where it's now, if the pole is down, moves down, say 90 degrees, and the Earth keeps itself straight. Well, now the coldness of the North Pole towards the North Pole, exposure to the sun, and various other things that make that happen. Well, that's where you can see where you'd have the glaciers would begin to move further down into, say, the United States. Right up to my backyard here. Is there's just to the north here is Marengo. There's Marengo Ridge, and it's formed by glacier movements. And there's Glacier National Park, which is also, that's just a little bit east, but also north of where we are here. And you see these changes from the past, and to think what will happen when that pole shift happens. That's where we'll see things along those lines again.
Absolutely. The part of the reason why I pulled this book up is because you're bringing up those cataclysms, you're bringing up those pole shifts that have taken place, and since we're touching on it, this is a book that I recommend to everybody out there. If you want to get a better understanding of the history of the cataclysms of this earth, this author does a pretty good job, in my opinion, of explaining a lot of that. And not only that, his information clearly was important enough for the CIA to classify his book for a number of years, and then to have recently declassified it about 12 years ago.
Is this the one that has some of the dates in there for pole shifting?
That it does.
This is the one.
Yep,
Great.
this is the one.
And then this is there was, I think there's an older version of it that has even less classification to it, so it's got a little bit further back information as far as digging around in the glaciers and so on. They come up with the patterns, weather patterns, and so on, and the changes that go along with that. Is this the one that has where it's less censored, or is there another version?
This is the full version of the book.
Okay. Yeah. So check that out. It's on there it is. Interesting little time chart there. Somewhere between 7 and 13,000 years between pole shifting. 13.
And just for everybody out there who wants to know, this is on page 24 of the book. And I'll read it to everybody for a second. Notice that the end of an era is the same as the start of the next era. Although the chart is in terms of years ago and years duration, do remember that the change from one era to the next occurs in a fraction of a day, short enough to be called abrupt. Areas at the North Pole, Arctic Ocean, start 7,000 years ago. Doesn't know when it's going to end, doesn't know the full duration, because that's where the North Pole is still the Arctic Ocean right now. The Sudan Basin started 11,500 years ago as the North Pole and ended 7,000 years ago as the Arctic Ocean became the North Pole. The duration of time was nearly 5,000 years, 4,500 years. Hudson Bay, 18,500 years ago. It is proposed by this author as the former North Pole, and it ended 11,500 years ago. So its duration was 7,000 years. Caspian Sea, so on and so on. Wisconsin, so on and so
on. Are there geniuses buried in underground somewhere writing all this stuff down to the way, I mean, predictions of what's actually going to happen? And in the meantime, they're not talking about it. It's not something that you see in science news, but yet that scientists, that people that do research, they're finding this stuff and they're seeing this stuff. So why isn't it being talked about?
Well, it's not being talked about because when you want the old world to die, you got to take all of the old information out of the doctrine, and then you got to give the people the new doctrine so that they'll be locked in on whatever is new. And then you're going to create different vibrations of people. There's going to be some who are going to vibrate higher. Well, who are they? PhD mofos, MD, Juris Doctor of the Law. These are the ones up here with the new information, and they're real fly with the information. Then you have a few people who are not as high, and a few people who are, and when you have this flow, now what you've done is you've really controlled all of the people, no matter whether they're Pookie on the corner or they're Karen who's doing crazy stuff at the grocery store, or they're all the way up to Neil deGrasse Tyson's boss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And does saying these things, does that make us conspiracy theorists?
Absolutely not. It puts us in the realm of people who speak the truth.
Now, that's right.
People who are in a mind frame of not really reading too much, they don't do too much studying. If they've got a lot of fear, guilt, doubt, and disbelief within them, then they're going to have trauma responses to individuals like us giving this information, because for them, it's way above what they're able to properly assimilate and understand. So it's not every one of them who's not at that level, but it's the people who, they got a lot of fear, guilt, doubt, and disbelief that they're dealing with. Now, if they're in a higher vibration, they'll probably be somebody who's like, oh, wow, that's some really interesting information. Let me hear a little bit more. Let me take some notes. Let me do my own research. But the ones who try to disassociate from it, information, or they have
We are.
resistance.
We
This is just, those are trauma responses. What were you saying?
I was saying that we got dropped out here, so I was just looking to see. I was trying to see if I could see that we're live or not, and I did not post it on my page. So,
Well, you still can sign in now if you like. But yeah, man, there's it's systematic spiritual warfare that's been waged on the people. And this systematic spiritual warfare has been waged heaviest on melanated peoples in America, but it's been waged on the Caucasian peoples of America as well. The Caucasian peoples of America are in a similar boat with many of the melanated peoples as far as this whole ward of the state thing goes, and tricking a whole bunch of people to believe that they're the straw man in their everyday operation.
Absolutely true.
Versus their natural proper person.
I'm just posting this on my page.
That all goes back to our topic today on episode 7, Black and White Podcast, Indigenous Structures in America. Why aren't these indigenous structures major tourist attractions? Why aren't people from all over the world saving up money just to be able to come and see these mounds? Well, because the American government won't tell the truth about them. Because if they tell the truth, then what happens is you got a whole group of people in America who find out the truth about themselves.
Right. Well, because if it's built like that,
it's never smart to wake up a sleeping giant.
Yeah, if it's built by somebody, that means that somebody really could claim ownership to it as well. True.
Well, I mean, the ownership has already been claimed. It's just claimed by groups of people who they're not popular. They don't control national narratives. So you're not going to hear about this on television. If you find it in a newspaper, you went back in your research pretty far. It was 1800 something, or it was the early 1900s. Past the 1970s, you're not seeing too much in there that's going to, in these different national narrative machines, that's going to support the melanated peoples of America or tell the truth about their background. They got to keep them believing that they're African Americans. They have to keep them believing that they came over here on a boat and that they were slaves. They got to keep them in that mind frame, because that's where you can control them. If they even do any halfway amount of research to find out who they are, it's over at that point.
Yeah. There's a lot of implications when you start taking a look at these things and what it means once people open their eyes and wake up from this really period of suppressed information. And when that information becomes real in people's minds, there's going to be a lot of those realizations that hit, and we're gonna understand what it's like to have, well, I mean, it's possible. Anything is possible. You've heard the words being spoken out there. Of course, it's for reasons that don't even make sense. But could there be revolution for something like this? And it certainly could be enough to make it happen, which I think is the reason for the suppression in the first place.
That there might be revolution. That's the reason why you think that's suppression.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
to keep people from revolting. A lot of these things.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that, but the oppression and the suppression has been from the beginning of the colonization period, as they discovered different technologies, as they discovered mounds and so many other things. There was multiple acts to destroy them, and other acts to either discredit them or call them things that they weren't. This is part of the reason why that book, Ancient Monuments of the Mississippi Valley, is in the Department of Defense's library. And I didn't pull that out of Princeton's library. Well, the reason why it was in there is because there's many mounds in there that are called fortified positions. When you start using that terminology from an author, now what we got to do is we got to use this as not necessarily actionable evidence, but intel on this group of people who we believe are hostile and might
Yeah.
not be.
Well, yeah, that's true too. That's true too.
There's a lot of misclassifications that's happened. There's so much misdocumentation that has happened. There's been a mass amount of confusion that's put out here so that people are not able to actively find the truth. And see, this is why, like, the preachers need to be more effective, because it tells you in the Bible, it tells you, and the sheiks too, it tells you in the Quran and in the Quran that purity will open all of the doors. So if a person is in a space of mass confusion, which is pretty much what the United States of America is right now, they can find their way through all that confusion by purifying this. Now they can see, they can hear, and they can feel in the midst of all this confusion, which we could liken to noise. And this would be a mass communication model. It just would be filled with a whole lot of people doing a whole lot of stuff. And this person who becomes pure within, now they can see the pathway through all of that, while everybody else keeps getting pulled to this Smirnoff, keeps getting pulled to that stripper, keeps getting pulled to that Disneyland, keeps getting pulled to that Walmart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. That just thinking about how the significance of what we're talking about today, indigenous structures in America, and what the history of America really was compared to what I was taught in history books, back in the 70s and 80s. It's just that the history of America is so different than what we read in books. Now, you were a whole generation after me, so I don't know. Did they change the books? Were they different? Or were you reading the same history of America that I was?
The books keep getting changed, but when it comes down to the public school system, it doesn't really matter what generation that we come from. All of the children in the American school system have been taught lies. They haven't been taught the real knowledge of this land. The majority of people, no matter whether they're melanated people and could be considered indigenous of this land, or they're Caucasian people, or they're whatever people, the vast majority of them can't tell you nothing about this land prior to the year 1492.
Yeah.
That's why I pulled these maps up. See, this map right here is of California, as well as the southwest portion of modern day Mexico. Well, I circled this word vermio, and I'd like you to indulge me, Tim. I'd like you to look up Vermio on the internet, on the Google real quick, and tell us what that translates to.
All right, I will.
Thank you.
Coming up in Spanish.
Mar Vermio is, I believe that is Portuguese.
Oh, well, Vermio, so Red Sea.
All right, now peep this, Tim. I'm about to take this off the screen, and I'm about to put another one up there for you. Okay, we're only going to do two, but I want you to look up this one as well and tell me what it means, the translation. And this one right here is in French, I believe.
Oh, gee. Rouge is red, so that would also be Red Sea.
This is from two different cartographers. I'm
Yeah.
not sure exactly what year that they put their matter of fact, it might say it on this one right here that I'm looking at. No, he doesn't have the year up there unless this is it. I'm not able to see the year. However, these are two different maps, obviously, two different cartographers. One cartographer wrote everything in French. So there's a French cartographer. The other one is Portuguese, more than likely from two different time periods. And they both are listing what we call the Gulf of America today as the Red Sea. And keep in mind that Goshen, Moab, and Mount Nebo are all in Utah today. We can all see them on a map on our cell phone if we want to. So these things are very significant to me when we have an episode on indigenous structures in America. You know, we're not just talking about indigenous structures, we're also talking about waterways. We're also talking about a connection to biblical history. We're also talking about a group of people who have been told that there's something that they're not, and they more than likely, right, without I don't have the official documentation, but based on all this other evidence, this is clearly the group of people who are the most influential and creative of all time, and they don't even know it.
Mm-hmm.
And just for everybody out there, I pulled up because I see we got a few people who just came in the room. Thank you very much for tuning into the Black and White Podcast. It's episode 7. We're talking about indigenous structures in America. Please understand that we got two maps that we just put on the screen. This one right here is in French, right? And I have the Gulf of California circled. As you can see right here, it's called Mer Rouge. Mer Rouge on Google Translate translates to Red Sea. Now, the other map that we just put up on the screen prior to this one, same thing, but the map was in Portuguese. All right. Understand that there's something that's being held as a secret about this land, that they don't want the Americans to know that that actually the bulk of the rest of the world knows. But because of the national propaganda, the propaganda machine, the national narrative, there's a whole lot of people who stay in the dark because they're taking a one-size-fits-all approach to entertainment.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah. But we got indigenous structures all over the Americas. All right. There's a lot of them in Ohio. There's a bunch in Illinois. There's a whole bunch all along the Mississippi River and all of the adjoining rivers, all of the tributaries. Just for everyone out there, where the Ohio River tributary dumps into the Mississippi River, that junction point right there, that's the southern portion of Illinois. That portion of Illinois is called Little Egypt. The city that's at that junction point is called Cairo. What hey Tim, what's the name of the ancient what's the name of the capital of ancient Egypt? Do you know?
No, I mean, would that be? Is that Cairo? I don't know.
The capital of ancient Egypt is called Memphis.
Oh, Memphis.
Now look at where Memphis sits along the Mississippi River, one of the most important rivers in the entire world.
So, well, now I know I'm going in a different direction, but indigenous structures. What is it that if you go out and you start looking for some of these things, like down around Memphis, what are we expecting to find besides? I mean, are we looking for pyramids?
Well, there's some are pyramids, some are shaped like animals. You know, you have the Great Serpent Mound. I believe that's in Ohio. Then you got Poverty Point, that's much larger than what most people believe. You talk to the people down there, they'll tell you it's in the shape of an eagle, and you have to be able to see the entire thing. You got to see it from the air. So there's bears, you know, that that were shaped as mounds. It's a lot.
Yeah, yeah. What else can are there other besides these and you were talking about these are large structures like the snake. I mean, this thing goes on, it's isn't it like several football fields long?
It's they're pretty big. Yeah, they're very, very large.
Yeah, like quarter mile or half mile. I mean that one's particular. That's quite long because it's narrow, so it goes on. Yeah. So are any of these are they burial are there burial grounds that are associated with this, or is that something that you'd expect to see?
From
That was
my
that.
understanding, the majority of the mounds are not burial grounds.
Okay.
They're more like let's say temples.
Because when I was a child, that was a lot of that's what we were told. That they were burial grounds.
Absolutely. That's what they're going to teach the people if they want to manifest a dead culture.
Hmm.
See, when you go out to these indigenous structures, one of the things that you're going to see is they're built along alignments with stars and planets. And this was to harness energy, not necessarily to harness it, but let's say to be in harmony with energy, right? The Great Pyramid of Giza is a great example. All three of the pyramids that's on the Giza plateau, but the Great Pyramid itself, it specifically was built for that purpose of harmonizing energy and then harnessing energy as a result. Scientists to this day, some of the most well-respected scholars have called it the greatest power plant that was ever built,
Hmm.
and it is to this day the greatest power plant that was ever built, and more than
That
likely
is,
ever be another one that'll be built better than it because it's one of those types of structures that doesn't require a whole bunch of manpower once you are operating it. It has its own water pump under it.
yeah,
A
yeah.
natural water pump.
And the way that has a lot to do with the way it was originally built with the limestone skin and the capstone. The cap that wasn't that gilded in gold?
Absolutely. Solid
Yeah,
gold.
yeah. It's you think about you think about the beauty of something like that when it was in its like first completion. And
Yeah.
that lasted for a long time before it started coming apart. Now, did it come apart or was it taken apart?
Certain pieces of it was damaged by, by man's doing.
Mm-hmm.
But, we're talking about thousands of years that
Yeah.
pyramid is sitting there. The bulk of these anthropologists and archaeologists have most of them have said it's older than what is on record. And there's a few of them who have said I'll give it about 12,000 years old, but I really think it's older than that. And that's based upon the water erosion that they've seen. So for me, I've heard multiple different uh, perspectives on how old it is. For me, my interpretation is that it's about 40,000 years old. And if you'd like to know how I come to that conclusion, I could show it to you right now.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, to see the age of it. The other thing is like for the Americas, or and where what we have here that stretches throughout the Mississippi River Valley is also the that it follows a line around and ends up in Mexico on the Aztec side, right? So aren't those all also connected?
I don't say, I don't understand the
So
question.
the Mexican, when you go down to Cancun area, and you go to the pyramids, the pyramids down there, they're Mayan.
Are you asking if they're connected, the pyramids?
Is there a relationship during that period of time? Was there a connection between the people at that time?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely a connection between all pyramids and these mounds. You
So
got to
they were
learn.
the same. They were the same people.
Everybody else has got to learn it from somewhere.
Yeah. So they were the same people that were up here in North America. Well, it's still North America, but
Well,
Mexico, West, what is today, those lands and the people were all connected and of the same mind.
before we get too off of the what we were talking about, let's come back to the Great Pyramid. So I'm pulling up this astrological wheel so we can use it as a reference of time. Let me see if I can make it a little larger for everybody. Yeah, that's a little better. All right. So when we look at the Sphinx could be let's say a representation of Leo. Okay. So when we use this wheel, we can use this astrological wheel to look at people's birthdays and their zodiac signs, and we can also use it to measure precession of the equinox. So one full circle of this wheel, one full cycle is 25,920 years, nearly 26,000 years to make one cycle. That makes each of these zodiac signs equivalent to 2160 years, 2,160 years. All right. So if we go back nearly 13,000 years ago, that puts us in the age of Leo. Okay. Because right now we're in the age of Aquarius. And we were having a pole shift during that time. The scientists call it the Younger Dryas. All right. So I don't think that people are building sphinxes and pyramids during the middle of a pole shift. So my theory is that you got to circle the wheel one more time and you got to come back to Leo again. So now that adds about nearly 26,000 years, 25,920 plus about 13,000 years. So that's about 39 to 40,000 years ago, if it happened during that time. Now, if it's older than 12,000 years old, they're not talking about it being 13,000 years old. they're not talking about it being 1,000 more years. No, they're talking about like 10 to 20,000 or more than that. So if it was erected at the time of the age of Leo, which would make perfect sense because the alignment with Leo is nearly direct, then we're talking about 40,000 years ago, or we're talking about 66,000 years ago.
66,000.
If we go back another cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Keep in mind, each time we circle this wheel, when we're talking about precession, we're talking about 2,160 years for each of these zodiac signs. So every time we go through the wheel, we're talking about 26,000 years added to whatever.
26,000.
Yes.
That's a common number. You see that number in other areas too, and it's all related to this.
Yeah. So that wheel helps us to tell real time. Most people think that they're telling time by looking at their calendar, looking at their watch. That's not the real clock. The real clock is the cosmos. This is where they get the the knowledge to be able to make the clock that's on this phone. And I'm not telling that to Tim. I've already talked to Tim about this. This is for everybody else that's tuning into the Black and White podcast. Really appreciate every one of y'all who are here. It's episode 7. We've been talking about indigenous structures in America.
And this, to me, I've got to tell you, I'm fascinated with this topic. This is relatively new to me. Well, most of it, I saw some things when I was a child, but it was not, talking about biblical, I thought things as a child, but I did not recognize what the truth was behind it, and which makes sense because that's not how it was being taught. It wasn't being taught with truth. It was being taught with ulterior motives. But man, I'm fascinated with this. I'd like to learn as much as I can about this. See our real history. That it changes things. It makes things different than what it is that we were taught all these years. I always say that been lied to.
Yeah, it empowers everyone out there who learns the real truth. See,
Yeah.
when we learn a bunch of lies, the hard reality of that is now our foundation of how we go after our goals, after how we go after our dreams, how we achieve things is rooted in a foundation of lies. But when we have a foundation of truth, when we go after the things that we desire, when there's the glass ceiling is not there. You're not worried about your house falling on top of you because your foundation is strong.
Mm-hmm.
So I highly recommend everyone out there learns the real truth of this land, learns the real truth of the melanated peoples of America today, the real truth of the other lands throughout the earth, so that they can understand how the governments of the world have been working together for a very, very long time to siphon off their energy through slavery, through mental slavery, utilizing democracies to put a people of multiple different nations in massive amounts of debt so that they would work their whole life and never have anything.
Yeah. Well, it's easier to keep the rich rich and the poor poor by keeping that division, keep that separation, keep the infighting, keep the confusion up. And
Yeah,
knowledge and information is the thing that can break that cycle.
absolutely. Absolutely. When the mind is freed of symbols that don't serve, that
Mm-hmm.
mind is free. A mind that's free is never going to take the body willingly into slavery in any form of it, no matter what form that it might be. A free mind is going to make the body free, even if it takes years to make it happen and they're doing it bite-sized pieces. That free mind is going to liberate that body.
Mm-hmm.
This is why the Great Awakening right now has everything unraveling. You got a whole bunch of people out here who are doing firsthand research, like myself.
Yep.
Instead of doing a bunch of, I do read from people who have done the research, but then there's a bunch of firsthand experiments and things that I've done myself. Even with my practice of root tribes, I'm able to see certain things to know what's real and what's a fugazi or something that's been put out as confusion. It's very clear now. I'm able to see these things, but this is from doing firsthand work, and then knowing, all right, well, this correlation that keeps happening in this firsthand work, well, then I'll be able to easily identify when I read a book if this is on some bull or if this is real.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, hopefully that's what we're finding out here. We're about halfway through this part of the series that we set up, and just keep on exploring into new ways to keep our minds free and educate ourselves and learn about what we can do to make changes. So you gotta fill in the structure, and the structure being get the truth, understand the truth, make sure that what we're doing in our lives is righteous, that meaning that we're doing the right things, not talking about it necessarily in a religious view, but in the view of how we treat one another and what we do as people to one another, and putting ourselves together. It's the best thing that we can possibly do,
That
because we're
sounds
all in
like that sounds like some closing remarks right there.
the
I'll give you the floor.
same. Yeah, and that's what it comes down to. What we're looking for is knowledge, and if anybody has some input and you want to put some stuff on our sites, add some questions, throw some things in there if you want to see us hear us explore certain topics or expand on something that you've heard that we're talking about. We'd love to be able to accommodate you. This is once this part of the series is over, we're gonna have a whole new series that starts back up again. So any of your suggestions or comments can go into future podcasts. Right now, the whole point is to explore our minds and get ourselves to understand what the truth is, and bring truth to the people and get people to connect with one another based on what that truth is. So that's always a pleasure to spend time talking to Ferdinand, and having this time that we have together is truly something special. We had an interesting conversation today. If you paid attention to the last podcast that we had, it was on communication. It's like, okay, this is going to be a hard conversation to have, and it was difficult, but it was fun. You know, we got through it. We got through it very well. So we handle those kinds of we get into a little bit of a heated discussion about what is the truth, what is the reality of things, and we have a lot of fun talking about it. I certainly like those opportunities. So I appreciate you, Ferdinand.
Thank you, Tim. Really appreciate you as well. Absolutely love our conversations when they're real chill and when they get a little irate. But we always do come to a consensus, which is nice. You know, it's not even like a agree to disagree kind of thing. It's more of like we're able to help each other come to a place of understanding, and I think that that's very, very valuable. You know, so I appreciate you so much for that. Appreciate your family. You already know. You know, thankful for Miss Elena. Thankful for your son. You know, thankful for Mama Pop. All right. All right. So listen, y'all. It's the Black and White Podcast, episode 7, Indigenous Structures in America. Listen, go check out the Mastermind Library. Right. Go grab you a couple of books out of there. Right. There's the ancient monuments of the Mississippi Valley. There's the Mound Builders, and there's a number of other books in the Mastermind Library. If you look down in the description of this video, the link to the Mastermind Library is there. If you have trouble finding it, you could go to fhtii.com and you could check out one of the previous episodes or this episode. And down in the description is the link to the Mastermind Library. There's nearly 1,000 books in there. All of the books have saving power. All of the books help lead you to something that you desire to understand, right? There's so much in there, so much great material, right? So I'm gonna leave y'all with that. All right, y'all be blessed. And on our next episode, we're gonna be talking about quantum physics. Be blessed and expose your gift.